What I want to cover in this show, and I feel a little guilty because it's a little bit of a bait and switch. The thumbnail, of course, talks about the U.S. criminal justice system, and we are going to talk about that. But the facet of it I really wanted to discuss is why it operates the way it does currently. We actually have this crazy woman kidnapped a child, a 3-year-old, and she's at gunpoint by the police officer, and this woman actually slashes this 3-year-old across the face. That knife could easily have killed that child. Slashes the child across the face, and the male officer, shoots the woman aggressor. And I want to start out with a little white pilling. So not everything about the criminal justice system is getting worse. And one of the things that's not getting worse is the fact that we get images like this. We get body-worn camera video on this. And the reason that matters is because it compels our attention to focus on the truth of what happened, as opposed to a lie, as opposed to a narrative, as opposed to what this would look like if it wasn't for the camera. Armed officer shoots woman dead in front of 3-year-old child, right? That could be the news headline. That would be pretty typical. Body-worn cameras have definitely been a net benefit for Americans' perception of criminal justice generally. Let's take a look at some of this. This is a news report on that event, just so we can kind of catch up on what happened there.
A female outside the Walmart at this location. She was holding a knife to a 3-year-old child that was in a shopping cart. The officers gave the suspect commands. At what time there is video that shows the suspect swiping the knife at the child, cutting him across the face. Officers at that time, at least one officer fired their weapon. And the suspect is deceased at this scene.
How did this knife attack on the child end? What resolved it? A dude with a gun resolved it. People ask me why I carry a gun. I've carried a gun on my person every day of my adult life. For more than 35 years, I've been carrying a gun every day. Why would you carry a gun in Walmart? This is why. What if this crazy broad was grabbing your kid in your shopping cart with a giant knife in her hand? How are you going to stop her exactly before she kills your child? So the 3-year-old boy who was attacked with a knife in the face by a woman outside of Walmart in Nebraska, this was Omaha, has already come out of surgery and is recovering alongside his family. The little Siler Hillman, child's name, now appears safe sitting on his father's lap, wrapped in a blanket and hugging a stuffed animal. He has stitches on his face and hand because, of course, he put up his hand to protect himself. According to the outlet, his parents described him as a brave little cowboy and assured that he will make a full recovery. And that's great news. But this is a poignant point here. Libs of TikTok writes, police body cam footage continues to be the greatest gift to come from the Black Lives Matter movement. They all thought, they believed, I guess, or they claimed to believe that the cops were just willy-nilly shooting black people, shooting minorities, just because they could. We want them to wear cameras and expose all this unlawful excessive force by the officers. But what if the cameras exposed, in fact, the violent conduct of the suspects that were shot? An infinite number of these. Here's a collection of 4. These are all people charging at officers violently, often with a knife in hand. It's absolutely insane, and thank God for these officers. They have these videos. Here's another montage, even more people. And in this case, the crazy lady with the purple hair who got shot dead by police and the dude who killed the young Ukrainian woman in North Carolina. Both of these people had egregious arrest records and were let back out on the streets by a kind, empathetic judge. In the case of the Ukrainian woman, the judge was a female, a magistrate judge. I don't know the gender of the judge in the case of the woman with crazy hair. The woman here with the crazy hair stabbing the child, Naomi Guzman, doused her own father in a flammable liquid, attacked him with a knife, set his house on fire, broke into the church while still armed with a knife, and destroyed property. She was found too incompetent to stand trial and got back out on the streets. In the case of the Ukrainian woman, DeCarlos Brown had 14 prior arrests, including for armed robbery and possession of a firearm by a felon. He too was let back out on the streets. And now the state of North Carolina has decided he's incompetent to stand trial. Now, fortunately, that guy's in federal custody, facing federal charges, so he's not just being released. And then I saw this post by my buddy Devin Erickson. He writes, most people think of philosophy as an abstraction that doesn't touch the real world, but they're wrong. Most real world problems are, in fact, philosophy problems, meaning How are you viewing the world? Are you properly viewing the problem? If you don't understand the question, you certainly can't come up with the correct answer. And he writes, most philosophy problems are giving things the wrong names, obscuring the problem and therefore obscuring the solution. For example, he writes, if you call feral drug addicts homeless people, then you can't solve the problem. You can only buy more houses for feral drug addicts to destroy. In this case, we call the police and the courts the justice system, the criminal justice system, but they're not. There can't be a justice system. The function of a justice system literally would be to give everyone what they deserve. Justice. Now, I deserve $100 million, he writes, a private Caribbean island and a foot massage from Lauren Bacall in her prime. But I don't see the justice system lifting a finger to correct any of this, do you? No, what we are supposed to have is not a justice system, but a public safety system. The proper name. The function of a public safety system is to keep the public and their property safe. If we understood that, if we saw the problem in the proper way, we wouldn't care about what criminals deserve. We wouldn't be empathetic to releasing violent criminals on the street 14 times. We would care about how likely they are to commit violence again or something worse. In a public safety system, as opposed to a criminal justice system, and mental illness are not, he says, migrating factors. I'm sure he means mitigating factors. They're the opposite because they mean the criminal is more likely to pose a future threat. We all understand this. We all understand that the feral who stabs strangers on the train for being white and beautiful is a worse person than the man who murders his wife and her lover when he catches them in the act. That's why they're different crimes. The first is murder. The second is a mitigated form of murder, manslaughter. Devin writes, not because of some abstract calculus of moral agency, of who is disadvantaged and who isn't, but because one is certainly going to murder more people if he can, while the other is a lot less likely to. If you gave a life sentence to criminals after they're convicted for their first violent crime would drop by 90%. Call it a justice system, and you have to argue endlessly about morality and redemption, rehabilitation. And then some lefty thug hugger weaponizes your own Christianity against you. Call it public safety, the proper name, and you can find the argument to likelihood of reoffense. And then you're in the realm of statistics, which you can compute. It all starts with naming things correctly according to their actual nature. And this is what got me on the track of thinking of all this as a problem of feminization of our society in the context of facing external threats. Because the feminine component of society wants to be kind to people, caring to people, forgiving to people, right? I mean, because that's how you raise children. That's an internal focus, and it's appropriate within an internal focus. But it's not appropriate when facing external threats. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with women or there's anything wrong with being feminine. In fact, these feminine traits are essential for having a proper functioning society over multiple generations. We need women to have these attributes. But the attributes aren't appropriate in every circumstance. It's like if we were talking about tools. You don't want to drive a screw with a hammer. That doesn't make any sense. You don't want to hammer a nail with a screwdriver. That wouldn't be very efficient. Every tool needs to be in its place, to put this kind of in context. So this post, Attraction Matriarch, he says the decline of the West tracks perfectly with the rise of female contempt for male authority, family structure, and natural order. And of course, this all arises ultimately from the 19th Amendment, from granting women the franchise, because women are the majority of the population. There are more women than men. And so you have a very different country if only men are voting, only men have a hand on the tiller of government, are making the rules for how society functions. You have a very different society in that than you do when you hand the tillers of government, the majority of the control, over to the feminine gender. They don't see the world the same way. They see the world in a softer way, which again is appropriate in its context, but not when it's facing external demands, external threats, external resource constraints. A response to this was, yes, systemization emotionless, calculating, hard rational. Think of Spock from the original Star Trek series. Systemization is male-coded to look at the world that way, not female-coded. Empathy is female-coded. Why might that person be attacking my tribe? What could have motivated them? The men don't care about that. The women care about that. By the way, if the woman's own men get killed in her tribe and she's taken by the enemy tribe, she becomes a woman to that conquering enemy tribe. She just transfers her loyalty to the winners. Empathy is female-coded. That's why the great feminization of all our sense-making institutions has been catastrophic for civic functioning. Order is subverted by caring. You end up with civic chaos and derangement. This account writes, feminized perception of truth boils down to Manichaean sentiment analysis. It's not what you said, honey. It's how you said it. Every girl in the room is a 10. It's how do you feel about what's being said, not the truth of what's being said. The truth is irrelevant to the emotive content. Does this idea have kind valence or mean valence? If the goal is harmony preservation, which it is in the feminine construct, operating properly internal to the tribe, if the goal is harmony preservation, the truth doesn't matter. It's not lying for the sake of lying to deceive someone, but because the mentality is one of maintaining social standing, a survival strategy manifesting as reputation management. We evolved in settings where exile meant death, especially for women with children. Even if the woman was not exiled from the tribe, but only exiled from the women of the tribe. Truth won't feed you or protect you. That's true. But being liked will. Women are particularly sensitive to this influence for a simple reason. They're smaller in general and can't physically impose their will in general. Feminized use of language will say things like words are violence and actually mean it, because assaulting feelings and perception is warfare to the feminine psyche. They don't see things as true or false. They see them as harmonious or disruptive. As I often phrase it as, women in general will always sacrifice liberty for security. And that's not unreasonable of them. That's what makes them women. They ask themselves, does this fact help my social status or hurt it? Things that increase harmony and status are good from the feminine perspective, whether or not they are truthful. Things that threaten harmony and status are bad, whether or not they are truthful. Accuracy is an afterthought in this judgment. An endocrine system, a biological system calibrated for consensus and cooperation, just believing whatever the narrative is that accomplishes consensus and cooperation, not competition and disagreement where you have to prove things. Truth insists that you move to prove. Empirical test. Does this plane fly? Harmony asks that you sit and believe. Well, I like him, so I'm sure it's a good plane. One lives primarily through the body, the other lives primarily in the mind. The strongest indicator of feminine cognition is its refusal to systemize, treating everything as new, denying patterns, resisting structure. This mindset will instinctively hunt for exceptions and treat them as rules, but not all. We see this in discussions of demographics and crime all the time. Of course, not all black people commit crimes. That would be ridiculous. But the 5% of the population that's young black men commits more than 50% of the violent crime. That's true. That's a fact. But it makes people uncomfortable. It makes women uncomfortable. This mindset will instinctively hunt for exceptions. It thinks a couple of anecdotes undoes an aggregate. That's chaotic reasoning. Systemization means rules. Rules mean standards. Standards mean exclusion, hierarchy. You're not allowed in. And exclusion is not as kind as inclusion. That's why all the girls in the room are deemed by the other girls, they're all 10s.